As many of you know, Chris is the author of Obsolete, How Change Brands Are Changing the World. He's also the founder and CEO of Serious Tissues, a toilet roll brand that fights climate change and deforestation by planting trees with every sale. He previously worked as head of strategy and social change at FCB Inferno, the UK's leading communications agency for campaigns that generate social change. And he's also the co-founder of Change Please, which I know many of us have drunk their coffee. They're an amazing coffee brand that helps homeless people off the street by training them as baristas. Available in 23 countries or more, maybe by now, and named the world's leading social enterprise in 2018. So welcome, Chris.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Anna.
I wonder if you might, before we turn to the book, just as a bit of scene setting, and it's such an exciting adventure, give us a bit of a sense of what your trajectory was before the book in terms of how you discovered change brands were a thing, how you supported clients in developing change brands, and how you went on to co-create your own change brand with Change Please, which we love because we have it on the West Coast main line. And then how you created your own change brand with Serious Tissues.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose it was, I mean, a very, very traditional background in ad agencies. I was a strategist, working on all sorts of big brands, every single category, everything from FMCG to banking to all sorts of different things like that. Gradually started to carve out a bit of an expertise in behavior change, did a lot of work on government, and started to want to use those skills around brand strategy and communications and behavior change to bring about positive change in the world. At the same time, started getting a little frustrated with some of the bigger companies we were working with, looking at the briefs, looking at the projects and just going, I think I'd try and do this differently. So we had the idea for Change Please basically in between meetings around Covent Garden. So just sat down looking at a homeless guy sat at the front of a coffee shop and people just walking past time and time again, and going straight into a Cafe Nero, I think it was, to buy a skinny latte. And I haven't got any change, looking at their phone, all of that kind of thing. And thought to ourselves, well, something's wrong with this journey. So had an idea of, okay, what if we could use coffee to tackle homelessness? What if we could train people that have been experiencing homelessness, maybe not rough sleeping, but the sort of statutory homelessness side of things, and help to train them as baristas? We talked to the Big Issue, who said, we love it, but we're not a coffee company. We're a magazine, so you need to find a coffee partner. And then at the same time, I was living in Peckham, and a beautiful moment of serendipity, met Jamal, who a lot of you guys will probably know, who's been the CEO and driving force of Change Please for the last 10 years. It will be 10 in November, which is incredible. And I think we got an incredible reaction when it first launched, loads and loads of PR coverage, and everyone going, wow, this is a very interesting way of tackling the problem. It's job first rather than housing first. It gives people this sense of the power dynamic shift, I think, is the thing that's really interesting. The move from, yes, basically people walking past you and ignoring you to people coming to you every day asking for something they value, and having, the conversation you have, the transformation you saw in self-belief and confidence was incredible. And that went on a pretty amazing journey. Like Paul and Anna said, it's on West Coast trains, it's in David Lloyd gyms, it's in loads of WeWorks, it's in various Google offices around the world, Amazon, Delta Airlines, Virgin. It's in all sorts of big corporate spaces. And we thought to ourselves, we're onto something with this model, this idea of getting people to make a simple shift in how they spend their money to bring about positive change in the world. Where else can we do this? And seeing as we were spending a lot of time in big offices, toilet paper was hiding in plain sight. It's one of the things you can't really miss when you're there. So thought to ourselves, okay, let's, alongside Change Please, let's build something else. At the same time, the four of us who founded Serious Tissues are all parents, all increasingly concerned about climate change and what the world's going to look like in 20 years when they all reach adulthood. So wanted to do something to tackle climate change and realized that toilet paper in its current form, made from virgin pulp, is an absolute ecological disaster. So the combination of us wanting to do something about climate change and the issue with the category meant we went out and launched Serious Tissues. So the world has serious issues. We created Serious Tissues, added one letter. What a branding masterstroke. Um, and then that's now coming up to 5 years. It'll be 5 years in, I think, 1st of April. So again, a big old journey with that. And that's getting into a good place. Not quite as big as Change Please, but lots of good signs in terms of tipping profitability and all of those kind of things. Um, and then when would it be? Like mid 2023, I thought to myself, this thought of move the money, change the world is bigger than just these two businesses, clearly. Loads of companies are out there doing it. Pitched an idea to Bloomsbury, which ended up being the book. And as part of that, spoke to 30 odd different founders and leaders at different companies, places like Tony's Chocolonely, Oatly, Wild, Small, Surrey, obviously Change Please and Serious Tissues feature in there, but other interesting experiences of brands at all sorts of different sizes. And yeah, and that probably brings us to, yeah, this time last year was a bit of a dark time of writing and sitting on my own. So it's nice to be out talking about the book and the ideas in it at the moment. So it came out in October. That's probably a good point for me to stop talking.
Although you were in isolation, you're talking to those people. What's interesting is the book is just fizzing with examples, but it feels to me as a reader that there's a really nice balance between the framing and the examples. You know, you have books that are all frame and a little bit coarse on the examples, and books that are just a list of examples. But your sort of framing is quite powerful. So I would say that it's a very action-oriented read in that regard and an empowering read. I wonder if you might kind of like to share some of the headlines in terms of the methodology that you introduce in the book.
Absolutely. It's probably the strategist in me going, there's definitely some common threads here. And like I need to planners love a model, planners love a framework. So I definitely looked for that. I think it initially started by going, actually, how much money is up for grabs here when you think about consumer spending, and that's the thing that's probably most staggering when I started digging into it. So consumer spending in every economy is between 60 and 70%, with a few exceptions. So so in the UK it's about 15 trillion, 1.5 trillion. In the US it's 15 trillion. If you move just 1% of consumer spend to brands that are making a positive impact in the world, these change brands that I talk about, that's moving $700 billion every year. So just 1%. It's not like you need every single transaction and every single category to be a purchase in this way. You only need a small fraction to move to make a really tangible difference. So that was probably the first port of call when you were like, okay, hang on, you're onto something big here. It doesn't need to be every single purchase that a consumer makes, because obviously that's really tough when certain things are at a price premium and we're all living through a cost of living crisis. So that was probably the sort of first part of it. And then the second part, I think that's really interesting, but I would say that is the framing of the model these businesses have. So the title itself, Obsolete, comes from a Buckminster Fuller quote, which is you don't change things by fighting the existing model. You change things by building a new model that makes the old model obsolete. So with that in mind, I looked into what is it about these models, these businesses that makes them unique. And I think there's a formula in the book that comes in somewhere in the middle, maybe chapter 5, I think, which talks about this change brand formula, which basically looks at a problem people care about is the place to start. So you need to start with something that people genuinely give a shit about. Homelessness and climate change obviously rank very high up in that regard. But it obviously is a movable feast depending on what's happening in society at the time. Ideally, you then also have a problem in the category, something that's wrong with the status quo. So whether that is toilet roll made from trees, whether that is some of the issues with health and plastic packaging and all the different things out there. Most categories have a problem you can be an improvement on. And then the final part was a tangible impact on that problem. So with serious tissues, we're looking at we plant trees rather than cut them down. So we've got a tree planting system that is a one-for-one model. We've planted 1.5 million trees, and that's really starting to accelerate. So yeah, basically a problem people care about, a category problem, and a tangible impact. And when those three things come together, it really creates something powerful.
Yeah, it feels like that's an amazing formula for taking it from just being a challenger brand or something that's an interesting startup to really having a concrete impact. And hopefully being able to do all of the things you talk about in the book, which I if anyone hasn't read it yet, they definitely need to dive into it. But I also wanted to ask you, what kind of reaction have you gotten to the book so far? And has it changed your activities in what you're doing day to day and the way you're thinking about things?
So it's been great. I mean, it's been brilliant being out and talking to people and digging into the ideas, and I've loved it. So it came out end of October. It had a reprint before Christmas. It's scheduled for a paperback later this year. It's out in the US now. It's out in Australia. So it's starting to tick into other markets and things like that. I think the biggest thing that I've really enjoyed is so in the last chapter, I talk about the idea of creating a rebel alliance. So there's one of the things that became really clear from talking to all these founders was there's all these brilliant businesses, but you're trying to compete with huge holding companies that have all the resources under the sun, and it's really bloody hard, right? You've got 10 or 11 massive holding companies that control pretty much everything we buy in the supermarket. They make over $1 billion a day in sales. So what we're trying to create is a sort of informal holding company that these brands can be part of. We started talking about that in January, and we've now got about 115 brands signed up to it. And the idea of it is really working together. So the idea of that collaboration is the benefits of collaboration outweigh the sort of benefits of competing against each other. So we've got things like we've had knowledge sharing sessions. We did a session last week with Sky to launch their Sky Footprint Fund, which gives them the chance to win a couple of million quid in media spend. When you're going to media owners with 100 brands rather than one, you get much better deals. Similarly with like things like fulfillment, and also having a sort of shared service model at the heart of it. So brands can tap into services in a slightly different way than they might if they were tapping into an agency, direct access to talent, no need to hire 10 people when you can tap into a sort of shared model that would replicate like a studio that sits at the heart of a big company or a shared service model. And it also helps with things like finance. So the fact that's gone from a standing start to 100 brands in 2.5 months is pretty mind blowing, to be honest, and really excited about how that can take shape and turn into something great.
That is a very exciting development and a lot of momentum building. And just on that theme of momentum building, though, we can't avoid the topic that it is such a strange time in the world. But in a sense, problems create the potential for change brands in the first place. In terms of the sort of opportunity landscape for where you might create new change brands, do you see new opportunities emerging today? I mean, for example, brands that challenge the incumbent social media platforms, brands that challenge big US tech, maybe brands even challenge brands that used to be brands that people would be proud to be associated with, like Tesla, for example. Is the sort of set of opportunities for where you might create a change brand evolving in the light of our strange geopolitical environment?
Yeah, I mean, to 100%. I think we're living through a decade of disruption. I think, and even before Trump came to power, there's huge disruptive forces like the rise of AI, like GLP-1 and Ozempic is going to be a game changer in so many food markets. HFSS regulation, the advantage of big brands has been massively eroded. So it's much. I think there's a bit in the book where I speak to someone I call Agent Change, who's basically a spy within big FMCG, talking about their frustrations with why they don't move faster and why they don't try and grasp these challenges. And the world where these big companies originated from, when it was, you know, everything was bought through a supermarket. There were 5 TV channels. Monocultures were great. Plastic was amazing. Everything, it was really easy to dominate. Whereas now there's a million routes to market, ways to find a consumer. It's so easy to spin up a brand. It's pretty easy to get a product made in terms of white label. And the health push, the sustainability push, there is so much disruption. So I think there is opportunity everywhere. Every category is up for grabs at the moment. And you don't need to get 10-20% of these categories to do well. You only need 2 or 3%. There's been some pretty big acquisitions already this year with things like with Pepsi buying Poppy, the probiotic soda. I think that was announced this week, and then Unilever and Wild a couple of weeks ago. That while it might not have been officially validated, it's very much in the works. So there's opportunity everywhere, and these guys need to reassess. I did a load of work with PepsiCo last year, and they are 100% trying to rebuild the plane while they're flying it. There's my cat. Um, and yeah, I think there is opportunity everywhere, basically. I think there's a great quote. What is it? In the midst of chaos, there is opportunity. I think it's Sun Tzu. So we are living through massive disruption, massive chaos. There's opportunity everywhere. It's just having the sort of nous and willingness to have a crack at doing that. And then I think the other point, Paul, just picking up on Trump and the recent shift since he came into power. Um, I mean, the main idea at the heart of the book is it's quite a capitalist view of changing the world. So it's basically move the money, change the world. And I think the thing about moving money is it almost takes politics out of the equation, because politics is slow, laborious, divisive. You get to vote once every 5 years. Does it make any difference who you vote for? Debatable, right? Depending on where you live in the country or in which country and all those kind of things. So, but you can vote every day, you can spend money every day. And if the businesses that are being shown to be a success are the ones that are making more of an impact, attracting investment, all of those things, it almost takes politics out of the equation. So, yeah, wild people may go, oh, climate change isn't a thing, or like plastic pollution isn't anything to worry about. But Wild have just sold the business for 230 million quid for doing something that is very much in that space because it is consumer led. So yeah, I think I'm pretty optimistic and hopeful despite the political landscape.
I suppose as marketers, we're professionally optimistic. And actually, in terms of opportunities, I wonder, in a sense, I couldn't help, we're marketing kind, and I couldn't help but notice how many of the businesses that you profiled were founded and led by people with a marketing background. I got into marketing, an embarrassingly long time ago. And at the time, it was often seen as a path to leadership. And in the interim period, that has probably become generally much less the case. Is your sense that the sort of opportunity to create change brands is also an opportunity for marketers to wake up to more of their own potential?
100%. I think it's amazing when you look at some of the brands that have come out of it. So I mean, Liquid Death, pretty high profile, and they're all ad guys. Fussy, the deodorant brand. Smol is out of Unilever. Surrey, they were ex P&G and advertising. So lots of these businesses, like Tony's, the guy who founded Tony's was a journalist. So lots of people coming out of the creative sector and going, there's an opportunity here. I think one of the things that we've got that we're very good at is human understanding and spotting trends. What we're not necessarily so good at is reading a P&L. So that's been a learning curve, I would say. But the way of spotting an opportunity and creating a compelling brand and proposition to hit that is absolutely our core skill set. The other bits you can learn, the P&L, the supply chain stuff and customer service and all of those things you can learn. The sort of intangibles of a career in marketing and understanding human behavior and trends, I think is priceless.
A lot of the economy is becoming an increasingly B2B economy. And some people in the marketing world see more of an affinity with B2C brands. So how strong can change brands be in a B2B environment?
I mean, Change Please has had an incredible run of success in working with big companies. So if you get one person to change how they spend their money, that's brilliant, and they can have an impact. But if you get the NHS to change how they spend their money and move their coffee, or Delta Airlines, the impact that unlocks, you're locking in 3, 4, 5 year contracts. So the impact of that is huge. Um, with Serious Tissues, we're just about to sign a big London university, and with them moving to us, and it's a 5 year deal. With them moving to us, it's a tree planted for every student in the student body. It's enough. What is it? It's the equivalent of charging 3 billion smartphones from the carbon capture side of it. It's the height of Mount Everest worth of plastic in terms of the recovery. So having those stories and the ability to go just by shifting where we're spending this money over here, this is the impact we're creating. We're creating jobs, we're creating impact, I think is big. And more companies are looking at that. You've got things like the by social corporate challenge, the social value act, the procurement bills. Lots of these lots of tenders are now subject to a social value assessment, which is about 10-15% of a lot of tenders.
Yeah.
Mm. So yeah, I think in B2B, it's as valid. I mean, things like D&I obviously have become a bit of a tricky one in recent weeks, but I think the need to make a positive impact, the environmental side, it's still there for a while. Whether that is social impact or whether that's environmental impact, I think it's still there.
You talked about the frustration that you had with clients, which is one of the things that propelled you to create your own brands. And the theme of cognitive dissonance comes up a couple of times in the book, where which you'll explain better than me, but the notion that the people become uncomfortable with the discrepancy between what they actually think and what they're paid to think or paid to do. Um, how much do you think brands are currently held back by marketing teams that don't really believe in the thing that they're marketing?
Um,
And how much does that play into the obsolescence agenda?
it's a tricky word, that, isn't it? I think it's really interesting. Like the amount of people who work in big FMCG companies who are wanting to fight the good fight and do better is strong, right? They definitely want to. I think it's interesting talking to Agent Change around this in the book. So there's a couple of things that I think spring to mind. The the need to be seen to basically the need to deliver a return in year one, I think is really challenging. So if you're Unilever, for instance, you if you're not delivering 1 or 2 million from your brand or your this product launch in year one, it's going to get killed and mothballed. It's much easier to generate that from a incremental new flavor or variant on an existing brand than it is to go, well, actually, let's launch waterless cleaning, because that might have taken 3 or 4 years to build it. Like the guys who launched Small came out of Unilever. Unilever tried to do something similar once they did that, and they couldn't do it. But Small is now doing massive amounts of money. It's probably up to like, I think it's last I heard was like 40-50 million, and they've raised an enormous amount of money. That would have taken them a few years to build towards, but Unilever wouldn't have been able to stomach that brand taking 3 years to get to 5 million. Which seems madness when it's now at 40 or 50, and it's a real competitor. Similarly with Wild, if they tried to do it internally, would it ever have got to the size it has? So there is the pressure on like short-term return, I think, in big companies, which makes things difficult. Um, so that I think is the key part. The other thing I think is they are very customer led as organizations, and it's very easy. I think I talk about it a bit in the book. This point that it's very easy if you don't support an innovation and it doesn't take off to go, oh, the customers didn't want it, and then it's very convenient to be able to go, well, actually, we don't need to worry about doing this anymore. And you look at things like the example of compressed deodorant that Unilever brought to market a long time ago, which was basically smaller cans, but it had as much, if not more, spray in it. It just looked like it was less value for the consumer because it was half the size of a normal can of Sure. So no one bought it because it looked tiny. But it was actually a brilliant innovation. But the lack of support behind it from a marketing point of view, just it was destined to fail. And they've had similar things with like waterless cleaning examples for Sif or Flash, I think, over here. So it's easy to go, the customers didn't want it. Let's not worry about it. Let's just keep doing what we're doing and making shitloads of money. Um, the other interesting thing, as a bit of an aside, P&G have taken an interesting approach with a brand they created a while back called EC30, um, which which is basically a waterless cleaning product. When they launched it, it had no mention of P&G anywhere on the site. It just looked like a changed brand. It was direct to consumer, really nicely put together. It talked about there are 700 billion liters of water shipped around the world, brackets, quite a lot by P&G. And they've recently, so that they built that up to a certain point, they've almost disrupted themselves from within. And now that product is available within the Tide range, so within the massive Tide detergent. So they're almost disrupting it, building the products of the future, and then applying them to their power brands. I think that is the way these bigger companies should look at doing it, is almost what is the thing we need, and it's going to hit market properly in 3 years. Let's build slowly towards that rather than try and buy someone and integrate them in the culture down the road.